What's up? So on we like to get all caught up and stuck with and identified with groups. A nation, a church, a family, a brand, a company, a city, an idea, even for that matter. An idea is still a group of concepts that you zoom out from the individual concepts and you focus on the whole of that group and you identify with that, if you like it, the group, in a subjective way, because you're a subjective individual and your views on that group will not be the same as everybody else's views on that group. That right there, that mentality that we have, is directly what creates anger, hatred, wars, ideologies, misunderstandings, miscommunications, protection, defense, all of that is made possible by the identification with a group or idea that represents a whole bunch of little individual components, otherwise known as generalizing. Generalizing is also, racism is a way of generalizing. And generalizing in racism is not all inaccurate and it's not all bad. It's simply how the mind works. It's how the mind makes sense of this place. But if you contrast that idea with personal relationships with individual beings, it's a whole different ballgame. It's completely different. A group doesn't have an individual spirit or awareness that you can directly communicate with. You can only directly communicate with individual members or units that comprise that idea group. And at that point, the group doesn't exist. The group doesn't exist in the first place. But when you're talking about relationships with human beings, or a relationship with a plant, a relationship with a self-contained whole, a unified whole, like a plant is a unified whole that's composed of individual component parts, just like we are a unified whole. Each individual being is a unified whole composed of the individual parts that you can look at and you can dissect and you can take apart. But by taking those little pieces out, you can chop somebody's arm off, and that whole that's comprised of the parts still remains whole. It doesn't lose anything for having the arm chopped off. And when you're having actual relationships with individuals, the rule set that seems to be applied to the larger ideologies and groups, companies, nations, this and that, all that stuff, those rule sets don't apply anymore. And you as the individual are free to feel into the nuances of the beings or friends or acquaintances, family members, anything, you're free to go into the subtleties of what that is. And that's so much greater rewarding than getting caught up in identities and group identities. It's so much more rewarding. That's the only thing that gives you anything. That's the relationships with individuals is what gives you nourishment. Because you don't have a relationship with the group, you have a mental identification with it. And that creates a illusory relationship which doesn't exist. And if you have fear responses based on what the group is doing, based on your subjective impression of what the group is doing, those are also illusory. Those are also not real. What is real is the personal relationships. It's as real as it can get. That's what you put your work into. That's what you put your time, your attention, your love, your intent, and then everything else forms itself accordingly around that situation. Your company can't give you love. If you apply the same metric or dynamic to every member of your family, you're not going to get love because they're individuated. That's what expectations are. They're always false. $7-Eleven. That's about it for now. Hope you all are well. Be nice to each other. Bye.